Warning, this podcast contains heavy spoilers for not just one movie, but entire franchises. We highly recommend going and watching these movies before listening to us as a companion piece that stitches all the timelines into one creepy, crime-ridden story. There will be no more spoiler warnings. We do not break character. After this, there is no turning back. You've been warned. Hit the music.
You are talking about the nonsensical ravings of a lunatic mind.
It's alive! It's alive! It's alive! It's
alive! It's alive! It's alive!
Hello, freaks and fiends, and welcome to It's Alive podcast. This is a true crime, paranormal, interstellar podcast covering unbelievable stories that sound like they were ripped straight from the pages of a Hollywood script. I'm your host, the outlaw Dr. H. George Smokenstein, THC, and with me, as always, is my very own Scream Queen, the perfect combination of beauty and brains, the bride of Smokenstein, the Indian horror, the expert of guts and gore, the gorgeous, sexy Amy Rose. Hi. This is it, episode 100. Ooh. We made it to triple digits. When we started, one of the main points I kept seeing come up, because obviously when you start something like this, you look up how to make a successful podcast. And apparently step number one was just getting out of single digits, because most podcasts fail within their first
10 episodes.
5 or 6 episodes.
Wow.
They rarely go beyond 2 or 3 episodes and then the people quit. We are now in triple numbers. Yeah. And I got a surprise for you. This is a double anniversary.
25th of March.
1 year ago today, we started videoing this shit. Just came up in my fucking news feed there just before we went on. 1 year today, we did on Gerta Moore live on video for the very first fucking time.
Thanks, Amy.
And if I've learned anything in this 2.5 years of podcasting, it's that number one, right? And this is important. If you're getting involved in podcasting, the first bit of advice I'd give to anybody is forget the idea of overnight success. Doesn't happen. No matter what you do, you can do whatever you want. We've had her parade around in sexy underwear, and still we've had to work hard to get to where we want to get to. Do you know what I mean? It's a grind every fucking week. You got to put everything on hold, which is why I put on like 2 stone weight, because I put everything on hold. And I saw the video from like last year to this year. I'm like, oh shit. Don't put your exercise on hold.
No. Because
now I got to fucking eat all this healthy food that I don't like. I don't get to eat any of my happy food. But I found alternatives.
Cheat day, it's fine.
But I found an alternative.
The chocolate mousse.
Yeah, Muller's protein mousse. Low fat, high in protein. Tastes amazing. So I'm just going to eat that now for the next year or so until I lose weight. Just chocolate mousse from Muller every day, every meal. Problem fucking solved.
Nice.
But that's why we put me behind the desk and her over there where you can see. So you have something nice to look at. Look at her.
You can look at him as well. Gorgeous. I mean, I mightn't be everybody's cup of tea.
Huh?
Say half the population would prefer you over me.
I don't know, because you girls, you're happy to go either right away when it suits you.
That's true.
So we are now at episode 100. So we're kind of like, for me, this feels like a new beginning into a new chapter, but we are now finishing up a story, maybe, that we started 5 weeks ago. A story like we once told 2.5 years ago in the space of 2 hours in 2 episodes. Yep. Less than 2 hours. I actually remember those episodes ran less than an hour. We barely got 50 minutes out of each of them.
But back then when we were recording 50 minutes probably took us like 2.5 hours.
Yep.
Easily.
There used to be like a paragraph, then the word break was in the script where we would stop. And because we weren't videoing it, it was easier. That was the main primary push to put this on video, was the idea that if I put it on video, it forces us to just continue. Because up until 2 or 3 weeks ago, we only had one video camera.
Now we got 2.
And now, so there was no say. Stopping involved me doing a lot of editing. Whereas now, I can change positions, change angles. It means we can take breaks again if we want without anybody noticing. But and if ever we needed a break, it will be on today's episode. Because do you know when people say they wrote the book on something?
Yeah, you wrote a book.
We worked out last night between the 5 scripts. I've written 284 pages on the whole Sawyer lineage. And for some reason, whereas usually when we start like a big story, it's always top heavy. And by the time we get to like the last episode, the last episode will run maybe 50 minutes and every other episode will be like an hour and a half, you know, somewhere in between that. For some reason, this story just keeps getting bigger. Bigger and bigger and bigger. I thought the third part. For some
reason, he says. I know the reason.
Because I got more and more obsessed as I went along.
Yeah.
The third episode I expected to be the longest because I knew I had a lot to cover there. Between San Antonio and Dallas and everything that went on. And then we went into episode 4. And that bastard was huge. That was 60 pages. And today we got an 80-page script in front of us. So buckle up, people. We're going to be here for the long haul. So with that being said, let's waste no more time and get the fuck on with getting rid of these damn Sawyer boys.
Okay. So when we left off, it was 1990. And for the first time since the legend began, the Sawyer family had almost been completely wiped out. Anne was dead. Tex, Tinker, and Alfredo lay beside her. Drayton was gone. Robert Chop Top Sawyer was behind bars, and the house in New County, the place where it all began, had once again fallen silent. To the outside world, that was the end of the story. Another violent chapter in rural Texas closed. Another family erased.
But if there's one thing we've learned in the last 4 parts, it's that the Sawyers don't disappear. They scatter. Because not every member of the family has been accounted for. 2 names were missing from every report. That was Bubba Sawyer and now, after last week, his daughter, Babby.
In the aftermath of the massacre, with police combing the area and investigators trying to piece together what had happened, Bubba did what he had done before when the world closed in around him. He ran, not far, just 10 miles down the road, back to the only place that he understood, the Sawyer house.
Which tells you everything you need to know about Bubba. No matter what happens, he always goes home. I keep saying this, but this guy seems like more the family dog than a fucking sibling.
Exactly.
You know, even running home as soon as he's hurt, as soon as he's damaged, it's like, I got to get the fuck out of here, back home to where I know, you know, sniff it out and get there.
This time, though, he wasn't alone. And with him was Babby, a child, a dependent, something Jed had never truly had to protect before. The roles had changed. Bubba was no longer just the weapon. He was responsible for something. And for a brief moment, hidden inside that rotting house, the last remnants of the Sawyer bloodline tried to survive in silence.
But that house wasn't a hiding place anymore. It was a memory. And the memories have a habit of drawing attention. In the aftermath of the 1990 incident, witness statements once again mentioned something investigators had never been able to fully prove. A large man, a mask of human skin, a chainsaw, but like before, it was treated as rumor, legend. Something exaggerated by trauma. Babby's name surfaced too, but only in fragments, inconsistent, unconfirmed, which is exactly where the Sawyers had always survived best. Somewhere sitting between fact and fiction.
But the more authorities dug into what had happened that night, the more those fragments began to form a pattern. And the patterns lead to questions, and questions lead to places being searched. Miles away, the news reached 2 men who understood exactly where those questions would eventually lead. That was William Earls Sawyer and his younger brother, Vilmer. Both were still serving overseas, deployed as part of the Gulf War, and when they heard what had happened to their family, they didn't react the way you might expect. Vilmer didn't rage, he didn't panic, he stayed calm.
Because unlike the rest of the family, Vilmer Sawyer didn't wait for problems to arrive. He moved before they got there. In that moment, the brothers realized two things. First, right, Bubba and Babby are still alive. That's a guarantee. They hadn't been listed among the dead, which meant they were still out there somewhere.
Yeah.
Second, if the investigation continued, it was only a matter of time before the old stories stopped being dismissed as legend and started being treated as something real. And if that happened, that house would be the first place anyone thought to look.
The decision was immediate. They had to get back to Texas, and they had to do it quietly. But before they could move, they needed to make sure Bubba and Babby were no longer where the world expected them to be, because the Sawyers had survived this long by staying one step ahead of the truth, and Vilmer had no intention of letting that change now. So before Vilmer and before Vilmer and W.E. could make their way back to Texas, there was one problem they couldn't solve from overseas: Bubba. And more importantly, Babby. Hidden in the old Sawyer house, they were safe for the moment, but not for long. The house was too well known, too connected to the stories that were already beginning to resurface. And if the wrong person decided to take those stories seriously, that house would be the first place they looked.
And Bubba, for all the damage he could do, was never really good at staying hidden. I mean, big lumber and fucking motherfucker with a human skin in his face. That's impossible to hide. The brothers needed someone on the ground, someone who understood the family, someone who's going to make my life fucking torture for the next 2 to 3 fucking more weeks, but wasn't directly tied to the Sawyer name.
And that's where another branch even of the bloodline came into play: the Wilson family.
We're stumbling all over our words today. We need to...
There's a lot of very similar sounding words. Bubba, Barmy, William, Barmy, Babby.
Who the fuck is Barmy?
Babby, see, Bubba, Babby, William, V.E., Vilmer. It's very hard to not stumble.
Yeah, well, you think this is bad. Next week's going to really fucking teach you.
I'm sick
now,
next week.
This is where things start to get interesting, because the Sawyers weren't as isolated as they like to pretend, or as we have been fucking making out for the last couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Wilsons were connected through Wilhelmina, extended family, removed enough to avoid direct suspicion, but close enough to understand exactly what the Sawyers were.
I'm surprised nobody had questioned us on this up until this point.
Why?
That nobody turned around and were like, well, we've been hearing all about Earls' side of the family. Who would marry their daughter off to such a fucking beast of a fucking family with a reputation such as the Sawyers? Because I'd assume, despite the fact that they hid a lot, they had to have a reputation for being the weirdos. And Earl had to have a reputation for being a bit fucking odd before all this started to... Because he has to be the catalyst, like the seed that from which this all fucking blew up.
Exactly. And 2 names in particular stood out: Uncle Hugo and Cousin Rufus. Men who had kept their distance from the core Sawyer clan over the years, but had never truly separated themselves from the family's way of life.
Different name, same blood.
Through quiet communication, the message was passed. Bubba and the child needed to be moved. No noise, no attention, no mistakes.
Hugo and Rufus didn't ask questions. They didn't need to. They knew what it meant when the Sawyers asked for fucking help. You know, it's a big deal for them to reach out outside of the direct family.
Under the cover of night, they made their way to the old house. And what they found there wasn't the monster people talked about in whispers. It was something far more unstable. Bubba was surviving, but barely. The house had fallen back into decay. Food was scarce. The structure itself was beginning to collapse. And in the middle of it all, a child.
Which, in that environment, is probably the most dangerous variable we have here at play. You know?
Yeah. Babby had survived, but survival wasn't the same as safety. Without the rest of the family, without structure, without guidance, there was no telling what she would become. Hugo made the decision quickly. They couldn't stay there, and they were moved out before sunrise. No witnesses, no trace, no evidence that anyone had been there at all.
And just like that, the last known location of Leatherface went cold. cold. But they weren't taken far. They were taken somewhere just a little bit quieter.
Somewhere just as forgotten as New County, but not tied to the stories that had already begun to circle it. Roguesville, which was a rural stretch of Texas that sat just far enough off the map to be ignored.
And like I said, same fucking different name, same blood, new ground, same wrath. This is going from the fucking fire into the frying pan, man.
There, the Wilsons took the child in, and Babby stayed with them, hidden and protected, removed from the attention gathering around the Sawyer name. But Bubba was never part of that arrangement. There was no debate, no uncertainty, and when Vilmer returned, his brother would come with him.
Because Vilmer didn't see a burden. He saw an asset, even diminished, even broken.
Yeah.
Bubba Sawyer still held value.
And in the world where Vilmer was preparing to build, the value would be put to use. By the time Vilmer Sawyer returned to Texas, the world had changed, not just for the Sawyers, for him. He hadn't spent the last few years hiding on back roads or drifting between abandoned houses like the rest of his family. He'd been at war, deployed overseas during the Gulf War alongside his brother William Earl. And while the rest of the Sawyer name was being torn apart back home, Vilmer was learning something else entirely. Structure, discipline, efficiency.
See, the mistake people make with someone like Vilmer is assuming he's just another version of what came before. He's not. He's what happens when you take everything the Sawyers were and strip out the weakness. Or at least that's what he'd like you to believe.
Yeah. Vilmer had grown up around every version of the family. He'd seen Anne's beliefs in bloodline and ritual, the obsession with preserving something that was already broken. He'd seen Drayton's attempt at business, selling what the family had produced, but never expanding beyond what he could control. And he had seen Bear's operation, the Bone Boys, the closest the Sawyers had ever come to something larger than themselves.
Yeah, Bear understood the system, but even he was still playing small.
Vilmer took all of it in and rejected all of it. Family loyalty had gotten them killed. Tradition had kept them stuck, and hiding had only delayed the inevitable. The Sawyers had spent generations reacting to the world around them, and Vilmer had no intention of continuing that pattern.
Yeah, Drayton hid and prayed, Bear supplied. Vilmer, he was planning something else entirely.
During his time overseas, Vilmer began to reshape what the Sawyer name meant. Not as family, not as a legacy, but as a function. Something that could operate within a larger system. Something that didn't rely on land or tradition or even identity, only results.
Because Vilmer figured out something the rest of his family never did. You don't survive by staying hidden. You survive by being useful.
That belief changed everything. Cannibalism, for Vilmer, was never the point. It was a byproduct. A habit the family had mistaken for purpose. But Vilmer didn't care about ritual, he didn't care about bloodlines, and he didn't care about preserving the past. He cared about control, money, and the ability to operate without consequence.
And once you start thinking like that, you're not running a family anymore, you're building an industry. Yep. And that's what he had aimed to do.
Yeah. And by the time he had set foot back in Texas, Vilmer was no longer just another surviving member of a broken clan. He was something new. Something colder, a man who had taken everything the Sawyers had been and decided it wasn't enough.
Yeah, the Sawyers used to be a problem people tried to ignore. Vilmer was about to make them something else entirely. Something that didn't hide in the shadows anymore. Something that didn't rely on chance encounters or isolated roads. Something that could reach further, move faster, and leave far less behind.
And as he made his way back to Rugsville towards his brother, towards Bubba, toward what was left of the family, Vilmer wasn't thinking about rebuilding what had been lost. He was thinking about replacing it with something the world wouldn't be able to see until it was already too late. When Vilmer returned to Texas, he didn't arrive empty-handed. Years earlier, during his time in San Antonio, Drayton Sawyer had been exposed to something far bigger than anything the family had ever built for themselves. Bear Sawyer's operation, the Bone Boys. A system built on movement, supply, and clients with very specific appetites.
Yeah, Bear didn't just kill, he ran a service. Drayton had spent years inside that world, watching, learning, understanding not just how it worked, but who it worked for. And more importantly, what would happen when it inevitably fell apart.
So he prepared, quietly. Drayton began keeping a record, not of his own business, but of Bear's. Names, contacts, clients, the kind of people who didn't ask questions, and the kind of people who expected results.
Drayton wasn't building something new. He was making sure he could just pick up where Bear left off. And when San Antonio collapsed, that's exactly what he did.
Using that list, Drayton rebuilt. He moved operations to Dallas, Texas Battleland, and for 6 years he supplied those same clients under his own control.
Different location, same customers.
When Dallas fell, the list survived. Drayton passed a copy to Anne, not as a curiosity, not as a relic, but as insurance. If one branch of the family was wiped out, another would continue. Anne never acted on it. Her focus was inward. Family, bloodline, survival.
Anne didn't want the outside world involved. I mean, that should have been painfully obvious from last week's episode. They're too unpredictable and too dangerous for the family and for what they believe in and what they do.
But Vilmer saw it differently. Before leaving for a deployment, he copied the list quietly, without permission, because, unlike Anne, Vilmer wasn't interested in preserving the family. He was interested in evolving it.
He didn't see a backup plan. He saw blueprints.
And when he returned to Texas, he didn't start from nothing. He started by reaching back, contacting the same names Drayton had used, the same network that had once belonged to Bear. Some numbers were dead and some connections had moved on, but not all of them.
Because systems like that don't disappear. They adapt. I think we can see that in the news and current events of modern times. These things have a way of just, you shut down one. It's whack-a-mole. You get one, another one pops up. You get another pedophile, another one pops up.
Never ended. And when Vilmer started making contact, he wasn't introducing something new. He was reintroducing something familiar. A supplier back on the line, but for all his ambition, for all his belief that he was stepping into something bigger than anything the Sawyers had done before, Vilmer was still following someone else's path.
Same list, same road, same business, just a different name at the bottom of the checks.
The difference now was that the people on the other end of that list had already seen this play out before. And they weren't looking for potential. They were looking for reliability, consistency, control.
And Vilmer was about to find out he wasn't as new to them as he thought.
When Vilmer began reaching out using Drayton's list, he wasn't stepping into unknown territory. He was stepping back into a system that had already existed. One that survived the fall of Bear, the collapse of San Antonio, and the destruction of Texas Battleland. Because while the men running those operations had come and gone, the people they served had not.
And, I mean, that's the part most people get wrong. They think the danger is the ones doing the killing. It's not. It's the ones waiting on the other end, waiting for the product, waiting for their, what they paid for.
At first, the responses were cautious, distance. Vilmer was a new name, an unknown variable using old connections. And in a world built on secrecy, that made him a risk. But he was persistent, measured. He said the right things and offered the right services. And slowly, someone took notice, a man named Jeffrey Rothman.
And this is where the scales shift. And I just might add, yes, that is the Jeffrey you're thinking of. That's the Jeffrey we're talking about.
Rothman wasn't like Bear. He didn't operate out of back rooms or abandoned properties, and he wasn't building something on the edges of society. He was already inside it, wealthy, connected, the kind of man who didn't need to hide what he was because no one was looking at him in the first place.
Or more accurately, no one was allowed to. Where Bear had built a business, Rothman was part of something much larger. Think royalty, presidents, politicians, movers and shakers that make the world go round. where, it's larger, something structured, something protected. Vilmer didn't understand the full extent of what he was getting into. Not yet.
But he understood enough to know that this was the opportunity he'd been looking for. Rothman made contact, not directly at first, through intermediaries. Testing, verifying, making sure Vilmer was who he claimed to be. And more importantly, making sure he could deliver.
Because in that world, reputation isn't built on talk, it's built on results.
Once Rothman was satisfied, the tone changed and the distance closed. The offer came. Vilmer and WE were still overseas at the time, officially deployed. But that status didn't last long. Through connections, Vilmer didn't fully understand. Arrangements were made. Quiet ones. Papers shifted, orders changed, and just like that, the Sawyer brothers were no longer part of the military. They were gone.
Yeah, not discharged, not reassigned, just removed. They were transported out, off the grid, taken somewhere isolated, a private island owned by Rothman. And yes, we're talking about that island. You know the island we're talking about. Jeffrey's Island.
It was there that Vilmer was shown what he would be stepping into. Not a gang, not a scattered network, a system, structured and organized and operating at a level the Sawyers had never reached.
Yeah, this was no backroads gas station fucking infrastructure. This was real infrastructure. This was, like I said, we are not talking about a cannibal clan trying to feed themselves. We are talking about the elite billionaires who want disturbing, weird sex, usually with underage women, boys, girls, children, and also had a taste for, as they put it, what do they call it? They have a posh name for human meat. Was it long pig? It's not a posh name, but it's their version of it.
Their version, yeah.
Long pig.
Yeah.
Mwah.
So Rothman laid it out clearly. There was demand. There always had been. But demand required supply. Consistent supply. Discreet supply. And that's where Vilmer came in. The terms were simple. Return to Texas, set up an operation, provide what was needed. Women, children, people that wouldn't be missed or wouldn't be found.
And just like that, the Sawyer family stopped being the main event and became part of the pipeline.
And Vilmer accepted without hesitation, because to him, this was it. The step beyond everything that had come before. No more hiding, no more scraping by, no more relying on chance encounters.
He thought he'd made it.
But even then, even standing on that island, looking at something far bigger than anything his family had ever built, Vilmer didn't fully understand his place in it.
Yeah, because he wasn't a partner. He wasn't an equal. He was being positioned, given a role, and roles can be replaced.
Still, it was enough. Enough for Vilmer to believe that he had finally broken away from the limitations that had held the Sawyers back for generations. That he was building something bigger, something smarter, something untouchable. But when he returned to Texas, what he built didn't look much different from what had come before.
Same purposes, same clients, same old background, same method, same small controlled operation, just a bigger world, but the same little corner of it. This guy thought he was going to be the, what's his name? The Pablo Escobar of human meat. Yeah. And it turns out he's just another street dealer.
Yep. Vilmer believed he'd stepped into something greater, but in reality, he had just found a new way to do the same thing. Only now, someone else was watching, and this time, they were in control. When Vilmer and WE returned to Texas, they didn't go back to New County. They didn't go back to the old house, and they didn't try to rebuild what had been lost. That part of the Sawyer story was over.
Well, you don't rebuild something that's already failed 4 fucking times. You replace it. I mean, we have the Sally Hardesty incident. We have the fall of San Antonio. We have the fall of Dallas. And then we have the second New County incident of 1990. So, I mean, what do they say? The the perfect definition of insanity is someone who constantly repeats the same mistakes over and over and over and over again.
Yep.
So this crazy man was proving that he wasn't quite as crazy as what had come before him. But really, he really was. I would say at this point of the story, we now know we're at the input, right? We know we're at the end of the Sawyer bloodline here. At this point, no matter what we do next week or moving forward, we have spoken at this point about every last Sawyer.
Yep.
Ranking that, who would you rank as, out of all of them, the worst? Maybe, or even the top 3 worst. Worst Sawyers. Like the most despicable, the most like fucking, with the least amount of scruples, least amount of fucking worries. The ones that would do absolute damage to without even thinking about it.
I think it's much of a muchness, Josh.
I mean, Bubba, for all the legend of him, is probably bottom of the fucking
Bottom
list.
of the list, but with the rest of them,
I would say Vilmer is top.
okay.
I think he is the number 1 lunatic of a fucking family of lunatics.
Yeah.
I think closely followed by Nubbins.
Yeah, I could see that.
And I would probably put Chop Top next. They seem like the 3 that generally were the wildest, the ones that the most unhinged of all of them.
Yeah, no, you're right. Yeah.
The ones that there was no real going back. There was no other direction for these people. There was no way of fixing them or putting them in it. I mean, if you look at the others, Alfredo left alone outside of that family would have just been a weird old pervy man running the gas station.
Yeah.
Same probably would have been said about Drayton, except probably would have just been the weird old man. I don't know if he would have had that perviness, because from what I can tell from all the research, that man didn't really have much interest in sexual habits.
No.
And you look at the likes of Tinker, who seems to have been one of the more intelligent Sawyers. And it seems to me that if he had been in a different family, probably would have used that intelligence in a different way. Similarly, Tex, Edward, I think he might have been another guy whose charm and charisma might have taken him in a different direction if he hadn't have had this mindset pushed on him from a very early age. Babby, well, who knows? We'll see.
Instead, they moved toward Newt, Rugsville border. Quiet, unremarkable, and just another stretch of rural Texas that people passed through without thinking twice. It was close enough to familiar ground, but far enough removed from the stories that still clung to New County. That distance mattered, because what Vilmer wasn't building wasn't meant to be remembered. It was meant to operate.
Yeah, and the best place to run something like that is somewhere nobody's paying attention to.
The first thing Vilmer did was reclaim what he considered his, Bubba. And when he finally saw his brother again, there was no reunion, no emotion, no relief, just assessment.
Vilmer didn't see family, he saw potential. Bubba had changed, the years alone, the collapse of the family, the absence of structure. It had all taken its toll. He was thinner, more erratic, less controlled than before. But the core of what he was, that hadn't gone anywhere. You don't lose something like that. You just bury it for a little while.
Vilmer made the decision immediately. Bubba came with them. There was no discussion, no hesitation. Whatever the Sawyers had been before, Bubba was still the one constant that worked.
Because no matter how much Vilmer wanted to evolve things, having a monster in your back pocket is always a fucking plus.
Bobby was a different story. She remained with the Wilsons, hidden, kept out of the operation entirely. Not abandoned, but set aside for now.
Because Babby wasn't part of the business. Not yet.
No. With Bubba at his side and WE handling the logistics, Vilmer began putting his new operation into place. A property. Temporary, functional, nothing like the old Sawyer household.
No, this wasn't supposed to be a home. There was no traditions tied to it, no history, no sentiment, no Earl at the head of the table, no shrine to Wilhelmina in the corner, no history. Just a place of business, a place of workspace, somewhere to do the butchering.
The setup was simple. A base of operations, a place to bring people, to hold them, to move them, everything designed for efficiency, for movement, for supply,
That sounds big, sounds organized, sounds like he's building something new, but in reality, it was still small, still contained, still operating the same principles that Sawyers had always relied on. Back roads, isolated victims, limited reach. The difference was in scale, it was intention, different purposes, same limits.
From 1991 onward, Vilmer began his version of the family business, not as a continuation, but as something he believed was an evolution. But even then, even with the new connections, new backing, and a larger system behind him, he was still operating in the same forgotten corners of Texas, still pulling from the same kinds of people, still leaving just enough behind to suggest something was happening, but never enough to prove it.
Because no matter how big you think you're playing, if you're still working the same roads, you're not as far up the ladder as you think.
No. Vilmer believed he'd stepped into something greater, but what he built on the Rugsville border wasn't an empire. It was a foothold. And like everything the Sawyers had built before it, it was only a matter of time before something pushed back. From 1991 through to 1994, Vilmer Sawyer's operation began to take shape. Not loudly, not dramatically, and not in a way that immediately drew attention. Because unlike the Sawyers that came before him, Vilmer understood that survival depended on consistency.
Yeah, no headlines, no noise, just a steady flow of human bodies.
The targets were chosen carefully. People who existed on the edges of things. Hitchhikers moving between states, girls leaving bars late at night, sex workers, runaways, young couples on long drives with no fixed route. The kind of people who could disappear without setting off alarms right away.
And when alarm bells don't go off, time becomes your best defense. The approach didn't look much different from what the Sawyers had always done. Broken down vehicles, roadside encounters, moments of vulnerability on isolated stretches of highway. Vilmer didn't reinvent the method, he just refined the intent. And this is kind of another reason why I think this guy is a little bit fucking crazier than the rest of them. Because outside of the fact that he was more vicious, more erratic, more fucking, he'd just go off the handle a little easier. He was delusional in the fact of believing that he was creating something that the family hadn't already been doing for fucking decades before him, do you know?
Yeah. And once taken, the victims weren't always killed, and that was the shift. Some were held, some were moved, and some were passed on, sent farther down the line Vilmer had only recently stepped into.
Because killing someone ends the transaction. Moving them, that's where the value is.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ, we watched a movie this week, an Irish movie, Bad Day for the Cut.
That was good.
And you really learned about fucking human trafficking in that one.
Oh, yeah.
And it's a fucking weird, dark world. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
You come over here, come over to like a fucking place. To be honest, the girls should probably know better when it's like, we're bringing you to Ireland to model. It's like, why Ireland? Do you know? Why are you bringing us to Ireland? And then as soon as you get here, the passport is taken off you and you're told, well, we bought you here. It cost us 10 grand to get you here. You got to earn 10 grand to pay us off with interest. So that's going to take longer again. And once that's fully paid off, then we'll give you your passport back. But that never happens. The interest keeps going up. And what happens is these girls, they rather try and run and they're killed. They get hooked on drugs to deal with the situation they're in and they end up dying. Or eventually, you know, time wears on and I don't know, maybe some of them get out, some of them manage to get out, pay their way out, or family have to pay them to get them out. But you know, it's not an easy exit.
No, it's not. So Vilmer's operation remained small, controlled. There were no large crews, no expanding territory, no visible growth. Just Vilmer, W.E., Bubba, and the occasional use of others when needed.
Sounds like the start of something bigger, but look closer. It never really gets there. Even with Rotman's backing, even with access to a wider system, Vilmer's reach stayed limited. back roads, rural routes, the same forgotten corners of Texas the Sawyers had always operated in, because as we all know too well, ambition doesn't automatically change your environment. We've been grinding here for 2.5 years. We slowly upgrade, but it takes time, it takes effort, it takes work, and this is without backing of any rich people helping us out here. This guy's got fucking elite behind him, and still, I think he thought because this elite fucking group were behind him that they would eventually see his potential and start pushing him up the fucking line. But they're never going to want someone this volatile close to them in any way, shape or form. The fact that they were using him, even for as long as they did, surprises me, to be honest with you.
Over time, disappearances began to stack up. Not enough to trigger immediate panic, but enough to form a pattern. People passing through. People not arriving. Vehicles found abandoned miles from where they were last seen.
Just enough to raise questions, but never enough to get answers.
And whenever those questions got too close, they disappeared. Reports stalled, investigations redirected, leads went nowhere.
That's not luck, that's protection. That's the power of the billionaire elite. That's the extra push he was getting that the family hadn't gotten before him. He wasn't getting pushed up the line. He wasn't making more money. He wasn't living more luxurious. And I don't even know if any Sawyer would really understand what luxurious was. I think the fact that he was living in a house that didn't require him to eat other humans, have sex with his sister, and have flesh lamps and bones everywhere was probably a big enough upgrade for him to be like, I've made it, guys. But this is the real side of what he got out of this connection. It was protection.
Yeah.
It was keeping, the nosy investigators, the ones that are getting too close, off of his back and away from his path.
Yeah. Rothman's influence kept the operation insulated, shielded, and allowed to continue as long as the supply didn't stop, as long as the process remained quiet, and as long as nothing drew too much attention.
Which means, for all his talk, Vilmer wasn't building something new. He was just maintaining something that already existed. Something they had been waiting to return since the Texas battle landfall in 1986.
Yep. And for 3 years, that was enough. Enough to keep the operation running, enough to keep Rothman satisfied, and enough to make Vilmer believe he was moving forward.
Again, these people probably had people like Vilmer all over the fucking world. He's just a tiny cog. But like we keep saying, nothing had really changed except the perception at the end of the day. It was still the same routes, the same scale, the inevitability, same outcome. Yeah.
By 1994, the system was in place. The routine was established and everything was running exactly the way it was supposed to. Until one night, a single encounter on a Texas back road would bring everything crashing down.
Because no matter how controlled you think things are, it only takes one mistake, which seems to be the one lesson Vilmer was missing for when it came to what his siblings had done before him.
By the time Vilmer's operation was fully in motion, there was one element he hadn't planned for. Something Baer had understood, but Vilmer had underestimated. People inside the system didn't always stay in the roles they were given. Some broke, some disappeared, and some adapted.
And that last group, that's the dangerous one.
Darla had been part of the system long before Vilmer ever made contact with it. She wasn't new. She wasn't a fresh victim pulled from the roadside. She had been in it for years. She moved through it. She was used by it and eventually repurposed by it.
Yeah, in that world, you don't retire, as we just said earlier. You just become something else, usually worm food.
As she got older, Darla became less valuable in the way the Rothmans' clients preferred. But she had something they didn't want to lose, awareness. She understood how the system worked, how to control fear, how to guide people without resistance. So instead of being discarded, she was repositioned, used to manage new recruits, to calm them, to condition them, and to make the process smoother.
Which is a cleaner way of saying she had break them in. For a time, Darla existed in that role, somewhere between victim and participant, but years inside that world take their toll on people.
And eventually, something in her began to fracture, Not loudly, not all at once, but enough to become a problem.
And problems don't get fixed in that system, they get removed.
Rothman made a decision. Darla would be sent back to Texas. Officially, it was framed as part of the operation and transfer, a resource being moved where she could still be useful. But that wasn't the real reason.
Yeah, this wasn't a reassignment. It was a test. They kind of told her she was going there because they had a few girls they needed her to calm down and to kind of prime for their next position. But obviously, Rotman had more nefarious ideas for Darla at that stage.
Yeah. Vilmer was told she was part of a pickup, another piece of supply, another tool. But behind that, Rothman had a different expectation. If she became unstable, if she became a liability, Vilmer was to deal with it quietly, permanently.
In other words, he was being handed a problem and told to clean it up.
But that's not what happened. When Darla arrived, Vilmer saw something Rothman hadn't accounted for. Not weakness, not instability, something else, something familiar.
Yeah, because crazy recognizes crazy. And he instantly took a shine to her. In fact, I believe he called her a hot piece of ass.
Nice.
And that became a running joke about pizza after that, where every time they saw a hot girl, they referred to as pizza. Darla wasn't like the others. She didn't behave like a victim. She didn't react the way people were supposed to react in the situation she was in. She moved through the space like she understood it, like she belonged in it. And for Vilmer, that was more than enough.
He kept her. Against expectation, against instruction, Rothman allowed it, with conditions. Darla stayed as long as she remained useful, as long as she remained under control, and the moment she stepped out of line, she was to be removed.
Yeah, keep her on a leash or put her down. They were the orders.
So Darla became part of Vilmer's operation, not as family, not as an equal, but not entirely as a victim either. She was something in between, used to move through the outside world. Motels, bars, roadside stops, places where Bubba couldn't go, and places where Vilmer didn't blend in.
Every system needs a face the people trust, even if that trust is only for a few minutes.
But Darla wasn't stable, not fully. What she had become wasn't loyalty. It was survival stretched too far. Her mind fractured between what she had been and what the system had turned her into.
Well, let's think about this. I mean, from what we know now, with everything that's come out over the last few years, we know that like these girls were brought into this system at a very, very young age, sometimes early teens, like 13, 14-year-olds, 15-year-olds.
Yeah.
And they're used up by these mega rich people who think they're never going to get touched by the law.
Yeah.
And I mean, used. And Darla is the best case of used up, because once she got too old for him, they were prepared to get rid of her, and then saw how she was able to keep the camera. Like, it's almost like she adapted. She knew how to adapt to each situation as it came to her, and she adapted and suddenly became like this fucking house mother to all these other trafficked women who were coming into this system. And it was her job then to keep these people calm and keep them relaxed and to train them on how to behave around all these wealthy men who just wanted to use and abuse their bodies.
Yeah. So Vilmer didn't care, because for the first time since the family fell apart, he wasn't just building something. He was attaching himself to it. And by 1994, Darla had become a fixture in the operation, a necessary part of the process, a bridge between the world outside and what waited behind it. But she was also something else, something Rotman had already identified, a liability. And in a system built on control, liabilities don't last long.
And Vilmer Sawyer had just decided to keep one. So what did that say about him to Rotman and co? Do you know?
By the time Vilmer brought Bubba back into the operation, he wasn't the same figure people had whispered about for years. The monster from Newt County, the shadow in witness statements, the thing people described but could never prove. That version of Bubba was gone.
Or at least what was left of him didn't look the same anymore.
Years of isolation had changed him. The collapse of the family, the absence of structure, the loss of everything he understood as normal. It had left him fractured, unstable, not just in behavior, but in identity.
Because Bubba was never just one thing. He was whatever the family needed him to be. Without that family, there was nothing left to define him. No rules, no expectations, no direction. So something else began to take shape. Fragments of what had been around him. Voices, behaviors, pieces of identity pulled from memory. Because when you don't know who you are, you start borrowing from others.
Bubba began to change, and not just in how he acted, but in how he presented himself. Clothing, posture, mannerisms. He drifted towards something softer, more feminine, a reflection of the influences that had once surrounded him.
Which makes sense, because the only sense of structure Bubba ever had came from the people around him.
To Vilmer, this wasn't a problem. It didn't matter how Bubba saw himself. It didn't matter how he behaved when left alone. What mattered was that when it was time to act, he still could.
Because under all of that, the same thing was still there. The strength, the size, the ability to do what needed to be done without hesitation, without question.
Vilmer didn't need Bubba to be stable, and he didn't need him to understand the system. He needed him to function.
And Bubba still functioned.
But
Bubba still functioned good.
He did. But something else still lingered beneath it all. Something Vilmer didn't account for. Bobby.
Because for the first time in his life, Bubba had something that he saw as his, and it was taken away from him. And I'm not going to get any deeper into that. There's more, but we're going to hold it.
His daughter, the only real connection he had left to the idea of family, and now she was gone, left behind with the Wilsons and removed from his world.
And if recent evidence of a recent story that has come out forces me to do another fucking update in this show, this whole thing with Babby might have affected Bubba Sawyer a lot more than we fucking think it did. You don't just take something like that away and expect nothing to change. There are repercussions, there are consequences, and I'm researching at the moment maybe bigger consequences than what we fucking initially thought, and we might be able to solve this legend of Leatherface. Maybe just get there.
Okay.
Just we'll see.
So that absence stayed with him, in the way he moved, in the way he reacted, and in the moments between action. There was something missing, something unresolved.
Which is a dangerous thing. When the person you're dealing with already doesn't think the way you do, and now he's lovesick, lonely, and confused, sounds like a fucking country song, it's a recipe for disaster. Can you imagine that? Bubba Sawyer and his cannibal brothers on the road again.
A lot of banjo music. But Vilmer ignored it because to him, Bubba was still the same asset he'd always been. A tool, a weapon, something to be pointed in the right direction and let loose.
But tools wear down and weapons misfire.
By 1994, Bubba Sawyer had become something different. Not the silent executioner of the past, and not the controlled force the family had shaped him into, but something fractured and unstable and harder to predict. Still dangerous, still capable, but no longer fully understood, even by the people using him.
And when you don't understand something that powerful, you don't control it. You just hope it keeps working long enough to get what you need out of it. I mean, we've discussed this before when it comes to dogs. I mean, there was a big controversy in this country with XL bully dogs. And I know American listeners that love their bully dogs. And we like our bully dogs. I mean, we got Staffordshire Bull Terrier half. He's a split. We had a pure breed once. But Caesar is half that, half terrier. Nobody knows what the terrier is. Nobody can tell us what the terrier is. We just know it's half terrier. And he doesn't have the full bulkiness of a Staffy.
No, but he's gorgeous.
But when we discussed the idea of like XL bullies, every time we see a picture of them, it's like, oh, they're fucking gorgeous. But the logic was always there.
Fight them off.
But that's the logic. That's the logic I always had was when you have a dog, dogs are pack animals. And the pack animal looks to the alpha of the pack for direction.
Yeah.
And if that alpha of the pack can't control the dog in that sense, then that makes the dog the alpha and now he's in control and he has the power. And I always said to you, was like, I'm a big dude. I'm 6'1". I'm fucking over 200 pounds in weight. I still don't think I could handle an XL bully if it decided it was having a bad day and it was going to take it out on us.
No.
So for that reason alone, it was like, well, if I can't handle something of that size, then realistically, should they be, available to just anybody in this country to have? It's like fucking off. It's like keeping a fucking lion in your backyard. And it might be a tame, nice lion most of the time, but it's still got that fucking DNA.
It's still got, yeah.
I don't believe in the outright banning of them from a country, but I do believe that, like, certain laws should be brought in where dogs of that size, that weight, that type should be specific. You should own a sizable chunk of land to own a dog like that.
I think for XL bullies, you gotta go under through a strength test.
Yeah, that you're capable of actually fucking controlling this dog in the worst case scenario.
I know somebody with a pretty, I don't know him, but he's got enough sizable enough dog, and the dog will be on the list as well. But my God, does that dog drag him around the place?
Yeah.
I mean, like, if you can't handle the dog, what pleasure do you have in having the dog? Do you know? And
well, in this situation here, Vilmer had his dog for a good reason, and he wanted it to be an attack dog, and he wanted it to be uncontrollable to a certain sense. Okay. As long as it was controllable by him and it didn't turn on him, he was fine. But they had ways of dealing with that too, and it was usually just bullying the shit out of the dog.
Yep. So in 1994, a girl by the name of Jenny Jones was preparing for prom. And for her, the night meant more than just a dance. Jenny came from a broken home, an abusive stepfather, a house she spent most of her time trying to escape. Her biological father had died 5 years earlier while serving overseas in a peacekeeping mission.
Which is the kind of irony that feels cruel when you see the guys who got a free ride home mostly unscathed. Say mostly because we'll get into it later, but Vilmer did have some sort of accident in the Gulf War that damaged his leg, and he wore this weird electronic brace he had built himself. It was like it had hydraulics and everything to help him walk. That he required. He needed this. No, obviously if he'd went to a doctor in 94, it would have just been a normal ass brace. Yeah. Maybe some surgery, but Sawyers don't have health insurance, and Sawyers don't like records, medical records included. So for him, it was, again, it just shows, and you'd have to assume he picked up a lot of this from Tinker Sawyer being around him. This guy, that's the one thing about Vilmer that beats everybody else, is the thing that takes him down is he is too erratic and too crazy. Yeah. But on the other side of it, the thing that keeps him going is the fact that he was able to... He wasn't a fucking innocent bystander of the Sawyer family and how they taught lessons and stuff like that. He was a willing participant who learned, who spent his time learning. Even when you look at why him and W.E. went to the military. I mean, when Robert Chop Top Sawyer went to the military, it was because they needed to get rid of someone. They needed to another mouth not to feed. You know, let's send him away for a while. He'll learn some cool new fucking tricks and torturing, because let's face it, Americans, when they're up against Muslims, like to do the torturing. And it was like, this is a cool way for him to learn, and it's a less mouths to feed and gives us time to rejig things back home here and figure shit out. Vilmer saw this and convinced W.E. to come with him, and it was like, we can learn how to apply our trade better by going here and learning from this. And they had already learned from various other fucking sides. Like we said, he'd spent time with the Bone Boys. He'd spent time with Drayton, who was, I believe, his natural father. He had spent time with Anne. He had learned, so under Anne, he's learning from Alfredo, from Tex, from Tinker. He's picking up from everybody how to continue on,
So for Jenny, prom night was supposed to be a break away from her shit home life. A chance to feel normal, to be around people she trusted, and to forget where she came from, even if just for a few hours. She attended the dance with her boyfriend Sean Kingsley, alongside their friends Heather Hutchins and Barry Rochester. After the prom, the group decided to continue the night, head to a party, and to keep things going.
Yeah. because nothing bad ever starts with let's keep a night going, especially when you're hanging out with anybody like Barry Rochester. If you got Chester in your name,
You're posh.
especially Chester on its own, you're probably not. But if it's like an extra syllable on there, like something before the Chester or Chesterfield or something like that after, you know he's a knobhead.
So they got into Barry's father's car and set off, but the mood had already started to shift. Barry and Heather began arguing, and what started as a small disagreement carried into the drive. Tension building as they moved further away from the town, and ahead of them, roadworks forced a detour. Traffic was redirected onto unfamiliar backroads.
And that's the moment they leave the world they understood and enter one they never knew existed.
At the same time, Vilmer and W.E. Sawyer were already in motion. Business had slowed, opportunities had dried up, and Rothman was applying pressure. Prom night presented an opportunity. Teenagers out late, drinking, driving on familiar roads, the kind of situation where mistakes happen and disappearances get written off.
Yeah, nobody looks close enough when they jump to a conclusion early on. And leads dry up instantly. It's just, okay, well, what's the most logical explanation here? It's prom night, cars crashed, bunch of drunks, we got it. Problem solved. Kids fucking freaked out and ran off.
So their target was 17-year-old Ronald Brock Ronnie. Driving home from his part-time job at a local grocery store, Vilmer and W.E. attempted to run him off the road. Ronnie panicked and accelerated and pushed his car past 90 miles an hour through roads he didn't know, in the dark, with only his headlights to guide him. He didn't see Barry Rochester, and Barry didn't see him. The collision was immediate, violent, and both vehicles came to a stop. Shaken but alive, the teens got out to assess the damage, and Ronnie exited his vehicle.
Yeah, according to Jenny's statements, she said, I'm okay, then collapsed, which usually means you're not okay, dude. You're not okay.
With Ronnie down, the group made a decision. Sean Kingsley stayed with them, and Jenny, Heather, and Barry went to find help on foot into the darkness.
Into the unknown, and the start of a night of horrors that would see only one of them left alive by the morning.
Vilmer had been watching, waiting, adjusting the plan with W.E. because what started as a single target was now something else. Witnesses, variables, problems. Vilmer made the call, and W.E. would follow the three on foot and guide them toward Darla's motel, the Last Chance motel, and Vilmer would handle the seal.
No, this was a divide and control, not even divide and conquer kind of situation. Darla's motel was an interesting thing. They set this up as almost similar to the gas stations of the past. It was kind of like a way for them to find victims, easy victims. Very similar to Bates Motel, the way we talked about that. Except obviously when we were talking about the Bates Motel, Norman was having different sorts of issues when it came to his victims.
Yeah.
These guys wanted people to come in so they could process them.
Okay.
Whereas Norman obviously would see them, want to leave them alone, and then Mother would tell him to do otherwise, and suddenly they were in the swamp at the back of the fucking motel. Whereas here, this was a very specific kind of, Darla's got the good looks, Darla's got the personality, let's stick her here and on this lonely stretch of road, only motel around, and when people stop, we can assess the people, decide if they'll be missed, if they won't be missed, how many of them are traveling, where their destination is it far enough away, are they missing, are they after getting lost, is this an easy fucking hit or not, and that's what the motel was kind of used for in that sense.
Okay. When Vilmer approached, Sean saw what looked like help. An adult, a truck, authority, relief, even if it was just for a moment.
And that moment is all it really takes, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Ronnie Brock was killed at the scene. His neck was broken by hand, and at first investigators believed the injury may have come from a crash, but later examination proved otherwise. The force, the angle, the damage, it didn't match the collision.
Yeah, he survived the crash. He just didn't survive what came afterwards.
Sean Kingsley did not die in the same manner, and he wasn't left behind. He was taken, removed from the scene, product for Rothman and Company.
Which is part of what makes this make sense, because leaving Ronnie behind wasn't a mistake, it was deliberate.
When authorities arrived, they found a crash, one dead teenager, and no sign of the others.
So what does that look like? It looks like panic, fear, 4 teenagers fleeing the scene to avoid consequences, a tragic accident followed by poor decision making. The story explains itself, which is perfect, isn't it? The story that explains themselves, they don't get investigated the same way.
No. Meanwhile, Sean was already gone, taken by Vilmer. Further down the detour, Jenny, Heather, and Barry continued walking, looking for help, looking for safety. And eventually, they found it. A lit sign in the distance, an open business. Darla's Motel, the Last Chance Motel.
That's something we didn't hit on when we talked about Darla's Hotel, because we did mention the name already.
Mm-hmm.
But the name isn't a coincidence, obviously. I mean, if you've been following the story with us, we know that both gas stations owned by 2 separate Sawyer brothers, Drayton and Alfredo, was called the Last Chance gas station.
Exactly.
So this is almost like, for a guy who bitches and moans about traditions and ritual, he still names the motel after his brother's gas station. So there's still some bit of Sawyer in him in that sense.
Yeah. As Jenny, Heather, and Barry moved further down the detour, the road gave them exactly what they were hoping for, a sign of life. A place that looked open, safe, and somewhere they could call for help.
Because when you're in the dark long enough, anything with light starts to look like safety.
The sign read The Last Chance Motel, and for the 3 teenagers stranded on an unfamiliar road, it was exactly what they needed, or at least that's what it appeared to be.
Names matter, and sometimes they're more honest than they look. Like the Bates Motel we spoke about earlier, when it comes to the last stop motel, you check in, but you don't always check out.
Inside, everything felt normal, quiet, still, unremarkable. No immediate signs of danger, no obvious threat. Just a place that looked like it existed to serve people passing through.
Which is exactly what it was, just not in the way they thought. Darla was already there, waiting, not by coincidence, not by chance, but by design. W.E. didn't just follow them, he guided them towards that motel.
Every step the 3 of them took down that road had been watched, adjusted, and directed until they ended up exactly where they needed to be.
Hurting them would be the proper term here. This isn't random, it's managed.
When Jenny, Heather, and Barry entered the motel, Darla met them like any normal employee would. Calm, approachable, familiar, the kind of presence that lowers your guard without you even realising it.
Because nothing about Darla screams danger. That's what makes her effective.
They explained what had happened. The crash, Ronnie, Sean staying behind for help, staying behind even, their need to call for help, and Darla listened and she reassured them and played the role perfectly.
Because she's done this before. This is her job. There was no panic in her, no urgency, no real attempt to get them help, just enough concern to keep them in place and to keep them calm, to keep them from leaving, which is what she was obviously good at when she was working for Rotman. Because the goal here isn't to stop you from running, it's to make sure you don't feel the need to run away.
Behind the scenes, the process had already begun. W.E. was close, monitoring, waiting, making sure everything stayed on track, because at this point, the situation needed to be controlled. No noises, no mistakes, and no one slipping through. Barry was the first to become uneasy. Something didn't feel right. The atmosphere, the delay, the sense of urgency. But by the time that feeling started to settle in, it was already too late.
Yeah, basic instincts only work if you listen to it early enough. What Jenny and her friends didn't realize was that the moment they stepped into that motel, They were no longer looking for help. They had already been processed. Not guests, not victims, inventory.
And from that point on, everything that happened next was part of a system they had no way of understanding.
Because once you're inside something like this, you don't find your way out. You get moved through it.
And for Jenny, Heather, and Barry, that process was just the beginning. Inside the motel, Darla agreed to help. She told the group she would call for assistance and that her partner Vilmer would be there shortly with his tow truck.
Which is exactly what you'd want to hear in that situation.
And with that reassurance, Jenny, Heather, and Barry made the decision to head back towards the crash site to check on Sean Kingsley, to make sure Ronnie was still alive, and to meet the help that was supposedly already on its way. As they walked, something began to change. According to Jenny's later statement, Heather became increasingly unsettled. She repeatedly claimed that someone was watching them from the woods.
And that's one of those moments, again, where your instincts are doing work before your brain catches up.
Jenny didn't see anything. No movement, no figures, nothing to confirm what Heather was feeling. But the tension stayed with them, following them as they moved through the darkness. And then suddenly, a car passed, driving along the road ahead of them. Barry and Heather reacted immediately and they chased after it, turning down a smaller roadway behind the car had taken, and Jenny was left behind.
Yeah, that split, from what we've learned from the last few years of doing this, that's the moment everything locks in and you are fucked.
Yep. In the darkness, Jenny quickly lost sight of them. The road was too dark and too unfamiliar and too quiet. She made the decision, and instead of following, she continued forward alone, back towards the crash site and back towards Sean.
Is it just me? Or every time you read a line where it starts in the darkness, do you break into that song in your head that, what were their names again? Oh, I should have looked that up.
It's oh my.
You know what I'm talking about, so obviously it does.
Shh, that's going to annoy me. I've been watching, I've been waiting.
Oh, my life. Oh, the name is at the tip of my tongue.
Oh, I know who it is.
Who is it?
The Rasmus.
That was it. That was who we were talking about. Anyway, so we just said that the two had followed the car and Jenny had decided to go back towards Sean, which, whether she knew it or not, was the only move that kept her out of what happened next.
Barry Rochester and Heather Hutchins continued down the smaller road, following what they believed might be help, and instead they found a house, isolated, hidden off the main road. Another Sawyer property.
And just like that, history repeats itself.
What happened inside that property was never directly witnessed, but evidence later allowed investigators to piece together parts of it. Barry Rochester was killed, bludgeoned to death. The exact sequence is unknown. No witnesses, no clear reconstruction, only the result.
Which is how most of these cases end. Fragments, not answers.
Heather Hutchins, however, was not immediately killed. She was restrained and placed on a meat hook through her neck, held for later use.
Through her back, because...
through her back, pardon me.
Just
She
could
survive through her neck.
Do you think? Really?
People get piercings in the back of their neck.
I've never had a meat hook jammed into the back of my neck. I would have thought...
Try getting that fucking piercing on the back of your neck.
I would have thought a meat hook in the back would be bad enough, to be honest with you.
Yeah, it'd be hard to kind of maneuver around the vital organs in your back, I would assume.
Yeah, she manages it. We'll get to it.
But she was held for later use and she was alive at the time. But unlike previous victims, Heather's story didn't end there.
Told you. Not yet, anyway. While Barry's fate was sealed inside the house, Heather remained alive, and what followed for her would unfold over the next stage of the night.
Meanwhile, Jenny continued alone down the road, unaware of what had just happened. Unaware that she had just avoided the same fate and walking straight toward Vilmer Sawyer.
Yeah, the road she stayed on was never leading back to safety.
No. As Jenny made her way back down the road, the silence around her had changed. What had felt like distance before now felt like isolation. No Barry, no Heather, no lights ahead, just the road and headlights approaching from behind. A truck slowed beside her. Vilmer Sawyer behind the wheel, calm, measured, and he told her he'd been called and that there had been an accident and that he was there to help. Jenny got in, and at that moment, there was no reason not to.
This is the part that always gets overlooked. Nothing about this feels like an abduction yet. It feels like assistance. That's why it works. If you were in a car accident and you left the scene to go get help and someone said they'd call the pickup truck and you're walking back towards the accident and the pickup truck pulls over and says, "Hey, are you the person at the accident?" What are you going to do? You're going to jump right into the fucking truck and be like,
please?
"Let's go."
Yeah,
you know?
no, that's true.
I've done it myself multiple
Yeah.
fucking times where I've been stuck and they've come along like, "I'll give you a lift to where you need to go." Cool sound. And I've jumped into the fucking truck. Do you know?
At first, the interaction held together. Vilmer asked questions. Who was at the scene? How many people? Where had they gone? Jenny answered, still focused on Sean and still trying to get back to them. But as they drove, something shifted. Vilmer's tone began to change. The structure of his speech started to break and his focus drifted. What had sounded controlled became erratic.
Yeah, that shift matters. It's the moment the performance starts to collapse. And once that happens, the situation is just going to start to spiral.
The truck didn't slow. It didn't stop. It passed the crash site completely. And Jenny noticed and questioned it. She asked about Sean. Vilmer didn't answer clearly. He kept driving, and his behavior became more unstable.
He's not hiding it anymore. He's letting it bleed through. Whether that's intentional or not, fucked if we know. Doesn't really matter to Jenny. Either way, she's in fucking trouble here.
Then he forced her to look and directed her attention to the back of the truck. Inside was Sean Kingsley, his body broken, severely damaged.
Yeah, investigators would later determine he had been struck by a vehicle, then repeatedly run over again and again and again. And that level of damage isn't about killing someone. That's overkill. That's about making a statement, about making the threat unrecognizable, totally removing all resistance, and also works as a good way of stopping your next captive fucking victim from any resistance, because she can see what happened to the last guy in the back.
That's true. Jenny understood immediately. This wasn't help. This wasn't an accident, and the man beside her was responsible. She didn't hesitate. She opened the door and jumped. The impact threw her onto the road. She rolled, scrambled, and got back to her feet and ran into the woods away from the truck.
And that decision isn't brave, it's instinct. The instinct is the only thing that's keeping her alive at this point.
Behind her, Vilmer followed, not with urgency or with panic. He kept pace, using the truck to track her movement, to cut off her direction and to steer her.
He's not trying to catch her. He's shaping where she goes. It's control, not pursuit, you know?
Every attempt Jenny made to break away was redirected. Every turn met with the truck pushing her deeper, farther from the road and farther from escape.
And at this point, she's not escaping anything. She's just being repositioned.
The trees began to thin and the ground opened up. And ahead of her was the Sawyer property, hidden and waiting.
Yeah, always the intended destination here. She wasn't supposed to realize that. Jenny Jones had escaped the truck, but she hadn't escaped Vilmer Sawyer. She had been guided to exactly where he wanted her to be.
Jenny hid in the brush, trying to stay. Is the brush still the same thing as the bush? Brush and bush are the same thing, are they? Or is brush more like short, long grass?
I think it's pretty much the same thing.
Okay. So she was trying to stay as still and as quiet as possible, her entire body locked in place as she listened for any sign that Vilmer had followed her into the trees. Then his voice came, not panicked, not angry, mocking.
If that's what you want, fine. It's up to you. Live and learn.
Good job. And then, just like that, he drove away. And for a moment, it felt like it was over.
That's the illusion. He doesn't need to chase her anymore because he's already controlled the outcome.
Jenny stayed where she was for a few seconds longer, trying to steady herself and trying to make sense of what had just happened before finally moving again. She had no idea where she was, no sense of direction, no understanding of how far she had come or how far she still needed to go. What she didn't realize was that she had already been guided exactly where Vilmer wanted her. Every movement, every turn, every step through the woods, all of it had been controlled.
Again, not pursuit, fucking herding. Herding like an animal.
As she pushed forward through the trees, the ground began to level out and the brush started to thin, opening up into a clearing, and that's when she saw it. The house, hidden, set back from the road, silent, waiting.
You don't stumble onto a place like that, you're led to it, man.
Jenny didn't hesitate. At that point, any structure meant safety. Any sign of shelter meant hope. She ran straight toward it, desperate for help, desperate for someone, anyone inside. But the moment she reached it, everything changed because she wasn't alone.
This is where the story stops being confusion and becomes recognition, because we have heard it now numerous times before.
And he came out of nowhere, Leatherface. The figure people had described for decades but could never prove. And according to Jenny, the first encounter wasn't like anything she could have prepared for. It wasn't controlled, it wasn't methodical, it was chaos, pure chaos. He screamed as he moved, a violent, guttural roar that echoed through the trees as he charged towards her, chainsaw tearing through anything in his path.
That behavior is consistent. It's not calculated violence, it's reactive. Jenny later described him as something out of a nightmare, like something from a horror film made real. She could barely make out his face in the darkness, only fragments, something deformed, something rotting, something that didn't quite look fully human.
His voice shifted constantly, jumping from deep, animalistic roars to high-pitched, almost childlike screams without warning. It was unpredictable, terrifying, and completely overwhelming.
That unpredictability is what makes him effective, though. You can't anticipate something that doesn't follow a pattern.
Jenny ran straight into the house, through rooms she didn't understand, driven only by instinct, by the need to put something, anything, between her and the man chasing her. She found a way up, an opening, a second floor window, and without stopping to think, she climbed through it, pulling herself onto the roof before dropping down to the ground below.
That's not a planned escape. That's survival overriding logic and a tactic used to evade the Sawyers twice by Sally Hardesty in 1973. So we are really with today's story, we're really going to see, and from this point on especially, a shit ton of parallels between the start of our story and the end of our story. It's almost like Vilmer was just reenacting what had come before him before it all blew up in his fucking face.
Jennifer hit the ground hard but didn't stop. She didn't look back. She ran straight into the brush again, pushing through the trees as Leatherface's screams echoed behind her. His presence still close, still very real. And just like that, she was running again.
See? History repeating itself. Different victim, same pattern.
Like Sally Hardesty before her, Jenny didn't stop moving, didn't stop running, and eventually, somehow, she found her way back to the road and back to the only place she thought she might find help. Back to the motel where Darla was waiting.
And again, back to the last stop. Sounds familiar. That's the real trap here. She thinks she's escaped it, but she's walked straight back into it, just like Sally with Drayton in 1973.
When Jenny made it back to the motel, she believed she'd found safety again. Not certainty, not comfort, but something familiar, something grounded. After everything she had just experienced, even the illusion of normality was enough to pull her back in. Darla was waiting, calm and composed, exactly as she had been before. And she told Jenny she would call for help and that everything was going to be okay.
And at this point, Jenny needs to believe that. Because the alternative is that everything she just went through leads straight back to the same fucking danger.
Yep. But Darla never called for help. Instead, she called W.E. He arrived quickly, and whatever illusion of safety still remained collapsed instantly. There was no conversation, no attempt to calm the situation. W.E. moved straight to violence. He beat Jenny down, overpowered her, and used a cattle prod to keep her under control.
What you trying your hardest to hold the Tipperary in. Right, you were so close to saying he better around the room. He did.
He did better. No, for me to say respond to you, I would say he did beat her because he did better makes no sense.
In any context, bet for beat doesn't work. I'm sorry.
He better.
Anyway, that's the transition point here. The mask drops completely. There's no performance anymore. Jenny was tied, helpless, and forced into the trunk of Darla's car. The lid closed above her, cutting off light, cutting off sound, as she was driven back towards the Sawyer house.
At the same time, Heather was still alive, and somehow she managed to pull herself free from the meat hook. Severely injured, barely able to move, she crawled slowly, painfully along the road, struggling to get away from the house.
That's survival at its most basic level. No planning, just movement. Imagine even the determination it would take. And the strength. She must have been a strong girl to fucking put your arms behind you.
You need to raise yourself up
and pull
down.
your body, your entire body weight up and then off of this meat hook to get loose. Do you know?
Yeah.
Mental.
Darla saw her and stopped and watched her for a moment and then made a decision. She didn't help her. She didn't finish her off. She just left her there and told WE to go back and collect her once she returned to the house.
And that tells you where Darla is now. She's not trapped in the system anymore. She's operating inside it.
Exactly. From Jenny's later account, the structure inside the group was clear. Vilmer was in charge completely. He controlled everything, every movement, every decision, every person in that house. He shouted constantly, issued threats, maintained control through intimidation and unpredictability. WE followed his lead. Darla complied, and Bubba...
Bubba isn't directing anything. He's being directed. Jenny described him as something closer to a battered fucking partner than a dominant force. Bullied by WE, handled with a sort of familial love by Darla, and used by Vilmer whenever it suited him.
Jenny herself had become the focus. Sean and Barry were already dead, their purpose decided. Heather was something else entirely. She was used as an example. They beat her, tortured her, all in front of Jenny, not for information or for necessity, but to break her, to show her exactly what would happen if she resisted.
That's control through demonstration. You don't need to explain anything when you can show it. At one point, Vilmer took it further, leaning in and biting into Heather's face. Not out of hunger, not out of ritual, just to make a fucking point.
Yuck. Once Jenny was fully subdued, Vilmer gave the next order. Darla was to clean her up and prepare her for Rothman, while the men began preparing what they referred to as the meat.
Yeah, and now everything shifts again. Because this isn't about the Sawyers anymore. This is about who they're supplying.
By the time Jenny was brought back to the house, events were already moving beyond Vilmer's control. What he didn't realise was that the outside world had finally started to close in. The families of the missing teens had raised the alarm already.
Yeah, because when you come from good families, your families realise within a few hours that you're missing, not within a few days. This isn't the 70s anymore, where they went across country and when they didn't show, and that kind of bought the Sawyers time before the Hardesty's parents were like, well, they should have been home by now. This is prom night, 17-year-olds out on a night out. Them not coming home on time, not meeting curfew. That's enough to panic the parents to say, well, we need to look into this. And I would assume if you grew up on the border of Rugsville and fucking Newt County, you probably heard some stories that make you extra careful with your fucking kids.
Yep. Descriptions were being circulated, names were beginning to surface, and across the road from Darla's motel, someone had been watching.
And this is where the smallest detail becomes the most important one. Because the one person they dismissed is the one who breaks the whole thing open.
An older man named Jim Sydow ran the gas station directly across from the motel, a place most people would overlook. a place Darla herself had dismissed as irrelevant. No threat, no concern, just an old man minding his own business. But Jim had seen enough. He saw Jenny, he saw W.E., he saw the abduction, and unlike the Sawyers, he acted, and he contacted the police.
That's the mistake, not the violence, not the operation. It's underestimating the wrong person.
While the officers began moving toward the hotel with a search warrant, back at the Sawyer house, Vilmer was preparing for something else entirely. Jeffrey Rothman was coming, and despite everything he claimed to reject, Vilmer chose to return to tradition. Not because he believed in it, but because he believed it was expected.
He's not performing for himself. He's performing for an audience he doesn't quite understand.
He ordered W.E. and Bubba to dig up fresh bodies. 6 in total. Different ages, different sizes, arranged carefully. A dead family positioned around the table like guests. Alongside them, what remained of Barry and Sean. Prepared, displayed, offered.
That's not evolution, it's imitation of what came before.
Darla was told to make herself presentable, but she wasn't the only one. Bubba was also included in that instruction. Dressed for the occasion, wearing a long black wig, a black evening gown, his nails painted carefully as he sat at the table. He sounds gorgeous.
From what I have heard in descriptions, it was think Morticia Adams if someone had thrown a bucket of acid in their face. So yeah. So that's the performance, not identity, presentation.
The dining room itself was a return to the old Sawyer way. Furniture made from bone, decorations of flesh, everything arranged to resemble something that had once passed as a family gathering. But there was nothing natural about it, nothing authentic. It was staged, forced.
Because that's the thing, like, I mean, before I get into my next part here, whatever about Vilmer and W.E. ignoring the traditions of the past, Bubba had been there since day one. And a lot of the time, since Bubba is only brought out for special needs cases, like he wasn't used every day in the way he had been by Drayton and Nubbins. He's an older man. He's not an older man at this age. He's in his 40s. He's went through a lot at this point. Like. And he's obviously, his mind is fractured. His thought process is fractured. But 90% of the time, Bubba was just left alone in his workspace and a little workshop that he had. So Bubba had continued to make the furniture and continued to make the fucking works of art out of flesh and stuff like that was left behind from the products they were supplying with Rotman. And but yeah, and the force thing, that's why this fails as well, because Rotman, he's not buying into the myth. He's just buying a service. This is completely the opposite to what he wants, despite what Vilmer thinks.
When Jenny regained consciousness, this is what she woke up to. The table, the bodies, the smell. Bubba seated beside her, calmly painting his nails. Heather restrained nearby, barely alive, positioned between W.E. and Darla. Vilmer moved around the room, talking, declaring, and threatening, spinning stories about what he planned to do with Jenny. None of it was real, all of it performance.
He's talking like he has options, but his decisions are already made for him. Do you know what I mean?
Jenny didn't play along. She didn't beg. She didn't break. She told him to kill her or stop talking, that she was leaving, and that nothing short of death would stop her.
And that's defiance, and in a room built under control, that stands out immediately. I suppose when you think of her background and her stepfather, you realise this girl, she lives in a daily nightmare as it is. This isn't a new game for her. This is just another level.
Darla tried to intervene, apologised to Jenny, and was immediately struck for it. W.E. spoke in his usual detached way, philosophical, almost amused by what was happening.
Yeah, apparently he spoke mostly in historical quotes, referencing great men to excuse his actions.
Vilmer snapped. Without warning, he picked up a hammer and killed W.E. in front of everyone.
That's the moment the structure collapsed. There's no hierarchy anymore, just instability. You see this in a lot of serial killers. It's almost like they can see the neck closing in or smell the blood in the water. Guys like Vilmer almost always go off the rails just before their reign is about to end.
He left the room and returned with lighter fluid, poured it over Heather and set her on fire. She screamed and ran and collapsed again as the flames died down. Still alive, still suffering.
And for people who were thinking, like, there's no way you could set someone on fire and they go out that quickly, you have no idea, man. Lighter fluid just there. That shit will burn up real quick and then it's gone. From watching wrestling for years, I have seen so many times where they're setting up the flaming table and they'll pour all the lighter fluid on and then they'll light the table on fire and the other wrestler will be too long setting up for the actual move to be done and the fire will go out and they'll have to relight the fucking table on
when
fire.
you're refilling the lighter with lighter fluid, the reusable lighters, and like your thumb will go on fire and then it goes out again.
Yeah, a little bit of lighter fluid would go out of my thumb, and then I'd just be messing with the kids over it. I know it's going to go out, or I could just shake it and put it out. So I like fill the lighter up, then turn it on, and I know there's a little fluid on my finger, so my thumb would go up, and I'd just be like, "Hey guys," and they're like, "Your fingers on fire, fingers on fire, fingers on fire," and next thing you're like, and it's gone. And I don't even feel pain off it. It's just instant. It's burning up what's on me. There's
always a moisture barrier there. Like.
So that's at this point. I mean, setting people on fire, fucking kicking up, fucking hissy fit around the place. This guy's lost control completely. He's completely spiraling at this point.
Then a car pulled up outside, and Jeffrey Rothman had arrived.
And just one more time, yes, that Jeffrey.
And just as suddenly as Vilmer had lost control, he regained it. Quiet, subdued, measured, like a completely different man.
That tells you everything about where the real power sits.
And Jenny saw it too. As she saw the shift and used it, she begged, appealed directly to Rothman, but Rothman was not interested. He looked around the room, at the bodies, at the setup, at the chaos, and he wasn't impressed. Not by the ritual, not by the noise, not by the attention this had brought. Everything Vilmer thought would impress him had done the opposite.
Vilmer thought he was meeting expectations, but really he was violating them, and violation was usually met with extermination.
Yep, Rothman didn't argue, didn't explain, he simply left, and in doing so, delivered the only message that mattered. Vilmer was finished.
Yeah. No warning, no second chances, just removal. Walking out in Vilmer without taking the product held as much significance as Michael kissing Fredo in Godfather Part 2, the kiss of death, or in this case, the exit of demise.
Vilmer understood immediately, and what followed was the final collapse. The moment Rothman left, everything changed. There was no argument, no outburst directed at him, and no attempt to stop him, because Vilmer understood exactly what it meant.
Like I said, this is the real shift. Not when Rothman arrives, but when he leaves. Whatever control Vilmer believed he had, whatever future he thought he was building, ended the second that car pulled away.
And what followed wasn't calculated. It wasn't controlled. It was collapse. Heather was still alive, burned, barely conscious. Vilmer turned his attention back to her, and without hesitation, he brought his boot down on her neck, crushing it, ending what little life she had left.
That's not part of the plan. That's just frustration turning into violence at this point.
The room fell into chaos. No structure, no direction, just the aftermath of everything falling apart at once. And then Vilmer turned on himself, and he took out a razor blade and began cutting his own skin, deep, deliberate, mirroring something seen before.
Yeah, not random. That's learned behavior. He's copying what came before him. The same erratic self-harm, the same manic energy, the same loss of control once shown by Norbert Nubbins Sawyer years earlier. The man I blame completely for the initial collapse. They got us this point. Norbert's mistakes are why we are where we are at in this story right now. And here is a guy who I put in the top 3 category of the worst Sawyers with Norbert as number fucking 2, doing the exact same thing. History repeating itself. Not as legacy, but as a full breakdown.
Jenny would later say that from this point on, everything blurred together. Moments overlapping. Sounds blending into each other. A struggle, movement, opportunity, and then a failure.
And that's the key detail. Not strength, not resistance. Failure in the system.
Vilmer's leg brace malfunctioned. The device he relied on to stay mobile It gave out just enough, just long enough, and Jenny broke free. She didn't hesitate and she didn't look back. She ran out of the house and out into the open, into the Texas rising sun.
That's the first moment all night where control actually breaks. Not shifts, not transfers, fully breaks.
Behind her, Vilmer recovered, Bubba with him, and together they followed, not as a coordinated effort, not as a system, but as what remained.
And at this point, there's no structure left. There's nothing left to protect. This is just instinct and damage control.
Jenny ran toward the road, toward anything that might lead her away from them. Anything that might lead back to safety. But the night hadn't finished with her yet.
Because collapse doesn't end the situation, it just removed all the rules. If anything, she's in more danger now than she had been all fucking night long.
Jenny ran out into the open road, the darkness of the woods behind her replaced by the rising Texas sun. For the first time all night, she could see where she was going, but she still had no idea where to go, and behind her, Vilmer and Bubba followed, not with the same control before, and not with the same structure, just pursuit.
And that's the difference, though. This isn't a system anymore, it's what's left of it.
Then she saw it, a motorhome moving along the road, real, normal, something untouched by everything she had just experienced. And inside it were Tobe and Kim Spottish. They saw her, slowed down, and stopped just long enough for Jenny to reach them, to get inside.
You've been saying Sawyer and Slaughter for so long now, it's impossible.
Everything is mixed up.
Anyway, for that moment, that should have been enough, but it wasn't. Vilmer's truck had appeared behind her, and it was closing in fast. In the flatbed, Bubba, chainsaw roaring, dragging the blade along the side of the motorhome, metal screaming as sparks flew.
The collision came hard, violent, unavoidable, and the motorhome overturned. Crushing metal, shattered glass. Tobe and Kim Spottish were killed in the crash, and Jenny survived. She forced her way out, falling, stumbling, and running again.
And at this point, survival isn't a decision. It's just momentum at this point. Just keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going.
Vilmer and Bubba followed on foot. The road open now. No cover, no control, just distance closing. Then a sound, low, growing louder, a crop duster flying low across the land. Jenny turned just in time to see it happen. The propeller clipped Vilmer's head, killing him instantly.
Hell of a way to get a sack from your job.
Yep.
You're fired.
Yep. His body dropped and the chase ended just like that. Jenny stood there trying to process what had just happened, trying to understand how it could end so suddenly. And when she turned again, there was a limousine, waiting, still, silent, and inside, Jeffrey Rothman.
Good old Jeffrey. And now the story shifts again because this was never just about the Sawyers.
Rothman spoke calmly, composed, in control. He explained that Vilmer had become a problem, unstable, unreliable, an abomination, and in his world, problems like that were removed.
Vilmer didn't fail because of what he did. He failed because of how visible he became.
Rothman spoke of his world, of people like him. More control, more discretion, more Stimulation. My God, my words. He offered Jenny...
If they were only simulating this stuff, we would have a lot less dead bodies and a lot less problems.
That is true. He liked
You know?
holodeck. He offered Jenny a place, money, a role inside that system. Jenny refused immediately without hesitation.
This didn't faze the untouchable Rothman at all. He knew not everyone breaks the same way.
Rothman didn't push. He simply offered her a ride to a hospital or the police. He wasn't concerned. Jenny didn't know his name, didn't know who he really was, and at that time, there was no easy way to find out. Jenny got into the car, alive, and for the first time since the night began, out of immediate danger.
But not out of the story.
Jenny gave her statement, everything she had seen, everything she had experienced, every location, every detail, and just like the events we've covered before, the evidence matched. The house was found, the bodies were recovered. Barry, Sean, Heather, the remains of what had taken place inside that property. Darla was found, arrested, and alive.
So once again, the physical evidence confirms the story.
But once again, there were gaps. No Bubba, no Leatherface, no confirmed identity behind the mask.
And that's what keeps the legend alive, because without a body, you don't get closure.
Bubba was gone, like he had always been. Unseen, unconfirmed, a figure that existed in witness statements, but never fully in evidence. Whether he was one man or many was never proven.
At that point, it stopped being a person and it just becomes an idea. But, so some new information come to light. We're still waiting for some more reports to be released, but we might have an update on that just yet. And on top of that, here's the kicker. For 5 episodes now, we've been claiming that Robert Chop Top Sawyer died in prison for the criminally insane in the year 2000. And I'm sure that plenty listeners who know the story inside out have been screaming at us through their phone screens, because yes, in the year 2000, it was reported that a man had been killed in the gym of the William Moseley Hospital for the Criminally Insane, beaten to a point that dental records were needed to identify the body. Those dental records were that of Robert Sawyer. But that's all of Robert that remained with that body. The rest of him was snuck out the back by an 18-year-old blonde girl with the help of a very controversial physician by the name of Dr. S. Quentin Quayle, better known to history as Dr. Satan. But that's a story for next week. But again, that means this story never actually ended in 1994 like we first claimed. Surprise! We're not done fucking yet.
Meanwhile, Rothman's story would come to a messy end later, 2 years later.
Yeah, in the year 2019, he was arrested, as we all know, charged with human trafficking and child abuse, amongst a list of other charges. Crimes that connected him to a network far beyond anything publicly understood. Darla Slaughter, as she chose to be known from that point on, became a key witness. Initially dismissed as unstable, indoctrinated, and unreliable witness, but when supported by documents, by names, by evidence, everything changed until it didn't.
Rothman died in custody, officially ruled as a suicide despite being under heavy watch and despite missing CCTV footage on the night of his death.
Which creates the same ending again. Evidence exists, but the truth disappears with it.
And that leaves us here, after 5 episodes, after decades of violence, with one clear conclusion. The Sawyers existed. At least some of them did. And by 2001, 3 were still out there.
The tree from hell.
Bubba, gone, unconfirmed. Babby Sawyer, alive. And Robert Sawyer,
not dead, just waiting. And what comes next isn't the end of this story. It's the beginning of another. Different names, same bloodline. But in terms of the Sawyer name, we might be done.
good riddance.
Might be. But again, information's been coming out slowly since about 2 weeks ago. And if that turns out to be what I think it is, then we might have an update when we're finished with this whole Firefly expedition we gotta go on next. Anyway, that's episode 100. 100 episodes in the bag.
Yes.
We were in triple digits, lady. We're getting old. I'm getting so old now. I'm stumbling over my words. That's
catching it
that's
off me.
what's problem. That's our problem. We're
so
stumbling
nervous because
we're
they're
getting
100
old
episodes.
now. We're 100 years old. We're 100 episodes old here. We're struggling.
How long do your episodes last? We're 100 years old. Fucking hell.
100 episodes old.
No, you're
feel
getting old. I still feel young. Thank you.
If
Thank you very much.
100 episodes isn't enough for you and you want more, then you can check out the Horrorverse Network on Patreon. It is $5 a month, 7-day free trial at the Horrorverse Network. You get it to live action, mini monsters, playing with bones, celebrity rap sheet, real talk with the monsters. I'm all over the place. Real talk with the doctor. And so much more. You can also check out our socials at Alive Pod, where we post reviews and little clips from the shows and all that kind of crack. And you can catch what is now known as Play and Slay with Amy Rose every Monday night on Twitch at Amy Rose 9, 10 o'clock to 12 o'clock Irish time. We'll be back next week with more tales from the Horrorverse and unfortunately from Rugsville. See y'all then. Same Alive time, same Horrorverse channel. Okay, love you. Bye-bye.